The fight for dignity often looks loud on screen, a dramatic burst of righteous anger, complete with shouting matches and overturned tables. Cinematic justice demands confrontation. It requires the oppressed to raise their voices to a scream to be heard above the noise of injustice. But in the real world, the most effective justice is rarely loud. The power that truly dismantles systemic abuse is subtle, procedural, and lethal in its quiet efficiency. It is the meticulous execution of process. It is the unimpeachable strength of documentation. It is quoting the correct policy number, the specific clause of the rental agreement, or the exact date on the foundational charter. It is the calm, unwavering tone that shows the opposition that you did not just arrive in a rush of emotion, but that you prepared methodically, anticipating their arbitrary resistance. The real shift happens not in public emotional outbursts, but in the smallest, most consequential gestures. It is the moment you choose a steady, policy-backed voice instead of shouting. The critical split second, a designated witness hits a record on their phone, logging immutable evidence. The quiet, cold confidence of presenting a singular, decisive document, a deed, a policy citation, a time-stamped email chain that ends the argument before it can even escalate into an emotional plea. This is the difference between fleeting frustration and lasting structural change. The aggressor seeks to define the narrative as emotion versus logic. Your task is to redefine it as policy versus violation. 3 precise words that freeze financial abuse at home and stop a condescending lecture in its tracks. Show me the trust document. Better than shouting indignantly at a dismissive administrator or a belligerent gatekeeper. The non-negotiable demand. Please cite the specific rule being applied, including the section and date of adoption. One quiet gesture that changes the entire power dynamic instantly, turning the tables on institutional arrogance, pulling out the heavy keycard, the proof of ownership, the meticulously filed deed that speaks volumes of historical and current authority. In the past 24 hours, we have seen systemic accountability delivered, not through fiery rhetoric, but in a polished public event hall, via the precise application of institutional bylaws. We have witnessed a lifetime of contribution dismissed in a callous, ageist 5-minute interaction, only to be restored and the aggressor dismantled in the next 10. The only tools used were calm courage, the prepared citation of policy, and the specific rule the bully foolishly thought only they had mastered. This is how power truly operates. Jumped Tanbrum the day the badge, spoke with historical authority. Let me tell you about Dr. Vance and the systemic lesson he delivered. Dr. Vance, 76, was not merely an attendant. He was a towering foundational figure in medical innovation, his discoveries having generated billions in endowment for the institution. Age, however, had brought a slight, noticeable stoop and a slow, measured, deliberate pace, the kind of walk that whispers frailty to the unobservant. At the annual institutional gala, the biggest networking and fundraising event of the year, held in a glittering, expansive city convention center, he was an observer, preferring the quiet perimeter. He leaned slightly on his polished mahogany cane, an elegant, necessary accessory that, tragically, served only to underline the ageist assumption of physical decline and functional limitation for those who did not know his history. He had not just worked at the research institute this gala supported. He had founded it 40 years prior, drafting the initial charter and personally selecting the first board members. He endowed the primary scholarship fund that paid for the dinner, the venue rental, and the salaries of the administrative staff. He was, quite literally, the foundation upon which this entire event, this very institution, was built. Yet few of the new digitally focused staff knew his face. They saw only an old man who looked tired, perhaps even lost, needing guidance rather than offering it. The conflict started not with deep-seated malice, but with a fatal, corrosive mixture of youthful arrogance, procedural fundamentalism, and systemic age-based assumption. Marcus, The newly hired, impeccably tailored and uniformed event security manager was young, relentlessly zealous, and determined to prove his mastery over every minute detail of the attendee manifest and the institution's rigorous, often self-contradictory, safety protocols. Marcus approached Dr. Vance near the main registration desk, a place of high visibility where the power dynamics of the event were being negotiated in real time. Marcus saw an opportunity to demonstrate his uncompromising efficiency to his superiors. "Sir," Marcus said, his voice carrying the sharp, patronizing boom of false, delegated authority. It was loud enough to attract nearby notice. "I need to see your badge clearly displayed. You appear to be outside the designated walking areas for general attendees, and you are standing too close to the emergency exit confluence point. We have a strict zero-tolerance policy against unauthorized loitering near main exits per Section 9.3 of the Event Protocol Manual." Dr. Vance, startled by the aggressive tone, yet wholly composed, politely unclipped the standard guest badge attached to his lapel, a badge that was visibly professional, though aesthetically simple. Marcus stepped closer, examining the badge with the hypercritical air of a customs agent scrutinizing a fake passport. He frowned dramatically. "This badge is irregular and appears outdated. It is an honorary trustee badge, designated Internal Code 7. This entire restricted area, the main hall and networking zone, requires the Executive Access Pass, Internal Code 1, for proper risk mitigation, and security tracking. Code 7 holders are restricted to the perimeter lounge and general seating. Sir, I appreciate your attendance and your history, but you are currently a safety liability and a procedural risk. I need to escort you back to the designated guest seating area immediately, or I will be forced to call institutional security for non-compliance." The truth was, Marcus had only skimmed the manifest for the last week's attendees. He saw the title, Honorary Trustee, a designation often given to beloved but functionally retired figureheads who were kept at a respectful distance from operational decisions, and instantly assumed Dr. Vance was a senile, slightly confused relic who needed firm, paternalistic managing. Marcus was not only citing the wrong policy section, 9.3 deals with vendor access, but he was fundamentally ignoring the core tenet of dignified participant interaction required by the Institute's own behavioral handbook, Bylaw 14, which explicitly forbids assumptions of incompetence based on age or apparent physical disability. A small crowd of mid-level managers and younger researchers began to gather, drawn by the loud, authoritative voice of Marcus and the stillness of the confrontation. The air went thick, heavy with collective discomfort and embarrassment, not for Dr. Vance, but for the inherent tension of witnessing a visible power play against an elderly man. The common, fatal mistake here would have been emotional reaction, shouting back, arguing heatedly about respect, or launching into a personal defense of who I am and what I have contributed, pleading for special treatment or getting defensive and flustered. Any of these reactions immediately grant the aggressor, Marcus, complete control of the tone and the narrative. It confirms his operational assumption that the subject is emotional, erratic, and therefore incapable of handling himself or navigating complex procedures. Dr. Vance did none of that. He knew that dignity is not loud, it is precise. It is the tactical deployment of rules. Debricated, silence is evidence. Policy is the weapon. Dr. Vance looked Marcus dead in the eye. His expression was completely neutral, registering neither offense nor fear, projecting an aura of almost clinical assessment. His voice, when it came, was low, measured, and utterly devoid of panic, maintaining a perfect, steady cadence. "Marcus," he said, using the manager's first name, immediately and subtly dissolving the manager's impersonal wall of security protocol and establishing a distinct professional distance. I accept your purported concern for institutional safety protocols and appreciate your commitment to enforcement. However, before I comply with your attempt to physically move or restrict me, I formally request 3 necessary steps in order based entirely on the Institute's official code of conduct. Section 4.2, Dignified Participant Rights and Procedural Confirmation. He paused, letting the specific policy number, 4.22, a section Marcus likely hadn't even skimmed, hang in the air like a newly introduced factor in a scientific equation. Policy, Dr. Vance understood, always beats ego and arbitrary interpretation. First, he didn't argue the charge of loitering. He simply raised a steady, impeccably manicured hand. I formally request that the highest-ranking institutional policy director, specifically in charge of event compliance and Code 1 access authorization, currently on site, be summoned immediately to confirm your interpretation and application of Codes 1 and 7 in this specific restricted zone. This step forced Marcus to pause the enforcement action and introduced an immediate check on his authority. Second, he reached slowly and deliberately into his breast pocket, not for a personal wallet or identification, but for his phone. He turned on the camera application, ensuring the microphone was clearly activated, confirming the recording function was primed, but did not press the record button yet. This was leverage, a silent, powerful warning of future action. I am formally asking for a printed or digital copy of the specific policy section you are citing. Section 9.3, regarding loitering near exits. I require this documentation immediately for procedural review before I am moved from this location, per my rights under Code of Conduct 4.2, subsection B, documentation before compliance. Third, and this was the critical table-turning shift, he adjusted his stance, centering his substantial weight on his mahogany cane, grounding his authority physically. He spoke the sentence that immediately shifts the locus of investigation from him to Marcus. And finally, Marcus, while we wait for the requested documentation and the summoned policy director, please note that this entire conversation, including your current attempts to remove me based on perceived physical frailty, age, and measured pace, which you defined as a safety liability, is now being actively documented as potential evidence. This behavior constitutes a direct, actionable violation of Institutional Bylaw 14, concerning non-discrimination based on age, perceived disability status, or mobility assistance required. He hadn't raised his voice by a single decibel. He hadn't accused Marcus personally of malice. He had simply used the institution's own carefully constructed legal language, documentation, specific codes, mandatory director confirmation, and Bylaw 14 as an impenetrable shield and an instantaneously deployed weapon. Marcus suddenly felt the immense, irreversible shift in gravitational pull. The arrogant certainty evaporated, replaced by cold sweat. He was used to guests who either meekly complied out of deference or flew into an inarticulate rage he could easily label as disruptive. He had no established protocol for calm, articulately deployed competence, citing specific, high-level bylaws. Marcus only knew how to enforce his truncated version of the rules. He had never been required to read or understand the whole book. Biripois, the reveal, bigger assets, deeper authority. The official policy director, Susan Vance, no relation, but ironically named, arrived minutes later, rushing through the rapidly thickening crowd, concern and professional dread etched onto her face. She took one look at Dr. Vance, recognizing the legend despite the decades, one look at the visibly shaken Marcus, and her color drained dramatically. Dr. Vance, I am deeply sorry. I had absolutely no idea you were being detained or subjected to any form of procedural questioning. Marcus, still locked into the mental framework that Dr. Vance was just an old, fussy, perhaps slightly powerful honorary trustee who needed to be managed efficiently, interrupted Susan to try and violently reassert his rapidly dwindling control. Director, the situation is entirely managed. This gentleman simply needs to comply with the safety protocol I cited. His badge is code 7, and the area is restricted to code 1 access. He is obstructing the fire lane, per my manual, section 9.3. Dr. Vance cut him off, not with words, but with a perfectly timed, dramatic action that stopped the policy director mid-sentence. He reached slowly into the deepest, inner compartment of his bespoke jacket. The movement was deliberate, signaling the impending presentation of something weighty, non-standard, and utterly definitive. It was not the deed to his multi-million-dollar city property, though he held those too. It was not the endowment contract. It was a single, heavy object, polished chrome, deeply etched brass, and set into black, genuine alligator leather. He lifted it and presented it not to Marcus, but directly to Susan, allowing Marcus and the now completely silent, captivated surrounding crowd to see its full, undeniable weight and antiquity. It was the original founding charter badge. It was not code 7. It was not code 1. It was designated simply and unequivocally code 0. Were. This code 0 designation, a piece of institutional history few had ever seen, represented the ultimate irreducible level of access. It was the founder's key card, issued 40 years ago, which bypassed and rendered irrelevant every single layer of access control, every security protocol, every restriction Marcus thought he was upholding. It authorized unrestricted access to every single area of the institution, including the private server rooms, the foundation vault, and the secure, classified archives Marcus didn't even know existed. The silence that fell upon the central hall was absolute and profound. The low, polite hum of the party died in the throat of the convention center. Marcus had not tried to manage an outdated honorary trustee. He had tried to remove, restrict, and discipline the original, foundational authority, who had personally conceptualized, authorized, and defined the very safety codes and access protocols Marcus thought he was upholding. Susan took the card, handling the heavy piece of history with palpable reverence. She didn't need to confirm any policy. The code 0 was the policy itself. Dr. Vance, she said, her voice shaking slightly with the weight of the realization, I am profoundly and deeply sorry for this outrageous violation of procedural protocol, and critically, for the intentional violation of your institutional dignity. Dr. Vance slowly reclaimed his Code 0 badge, sliding it back into the protected inner pocket, the act itself a final closing of the previous chapter. Marcus, Dr. Vance said, directing his attention entirely to the policy director, purposefully ignoring the visibly shrinking, sweating security manager, violated institutional dignity protocols with intent. He made prejudicial assumptions based solely on my cane and my measured pace, labeling me a safety liability without due cause, without consulting the primary manifest, and without knowledge of my access status. He then attempted to execute an unauthorized restriction of movement without first providing the requested documentation. He was giving Marcus no space to argue, no ground for mitigation. He was stating documented, recorded facts that were now logged on his phone and witnessed by the director. Silence, backed by policy, is evidence. The fundamental mistake was not the initial check for compliance, which is necessary, but the prejudicial assumption of functional incompetence that immediately followed. I required 2 specific systemic actions immediately, and 1 immediate correction of consequence. Nos tetras, ka 3 calm steps, 1 loud, systemic result. Dr. Vance's demands were not about personal revenge. He had no need for that, but were precise, focused entirely on mandatory systemic repair and procedural education. This deliberate focus is the defining difference between fleeting personal frustration and lasting, structural, institutional justice. Action 1. Immediate accountability and education. Marcus is immediately relieved of any and all duties regarding participant interaction, procedural enforcement, and safety policy interpretation, effective instantaneously. He requires mandatory intensive remedial training on the Institute's non-discrimination policy, specifically Bylaw 14, concerning ageism and ability bias, and, critically, the required tone of respect and foundational dignity when addressing any participant, regardless of their perceived or apparent status or physical appearance. If he cannot demonstrate documented, verifiable understanding and mandatory practice of this comprehensive policy within 48 hours, his contract with the Institute and any subsidiaries is to be terminated without severance. Action 2. The mandatory systemic fix. Every single staff member currently involved in registration, security, event management, and any role requiring interpretation of access codes is required to attend a mandatory 4-hour, fully recorded retraining session within 1 week. The topic must be Policy Beats Ego, Recognizing and Avoiding Assumption-Based Ageism and Ability Bias in Procedural Enforcement. The training must be led by a certified external specialist in non-discrimination and procedural compliance, not by an internal general manager or HR representative. Furthermore, all access codes, particularly Code 0 and Code 1, must be flagged on the active manifest. Susan, pale but now internally resolute, nodded firmly. It will be done, Dr. Vance. I will personally oversee the immediate implementation of both actions and provide you with the documentation of compliance within 72 hours. Dr. Vance finally looked directly at Marcus, who was trying desperately to make himself invisible within his security uniform. Young man, Dr. Vance said, his voice softening just slightly, but carrying the full, unyielding weight of his historical authority. I wrote the rules and helped fund this entire institution to protect everyone within it, especially those who might be easily underestimated or dismissed due to visible factors like age or requiring a cane. You must learn, Marcus, that the best tool for justice doesn't ever need to shout. It is always the specific rule book. He then dismissed the matter with a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Susan, turned, and, his mahogany cane tapping lightly on the polished marble floor, a sound that now resonated with untouchable authority, walked deliberately past the registration desk, which had miraculously cleared entirely, directly to the executive section, where he belonged by right of historical authorship and Code 0. The immediate consequence was clear, swift, and visible. Marcus was instantly escorted off the event floor by Director Susan, his badge already revoked. The visible outcome, a cancelled assignment, a formalized disciplinary action leading likely to termination, and a mandatory, costly systemic fix to the institutional culture. The quiet, long-term consequence. The entire staff, present and future, now fundamentally understood the true, career-ending cost of making assumptions about competence based on age, appearance, or the simple presence of a cane. This incident proves, beyond doubt, that when you meticulously possess the documentation and maintain quiet, prepared authority, you instantly flip the power dynamic. When you know the specific correct rule, you strip the aggressor of their only operational leverage, their vague, arbitrary, and easily challenged application of power and procedure. Justice Prep, the 10-minute fortitude ritual. Justice is never spontaneous. It is a practiced, rehearsed, and meticulously prepared response. If you or someone you care for is facing systemic ageism, institutional abuse, financial dismissal, or procedural aggression, preparation is your ultimate, undeniable leverage. Before entering any potentially high-stakes conversation, whether with a condescending financial planner, an overly aggressive healthcare provider, an unresponsive property manager, or an abusive family member attempting to control assets, dedicate 10 full minutes to your justice preparation ritual. Treat this time as sacrosanct. It is the moment you transition from panic to power. Goal: to move swiftly and efficiently from emotional panic to policy-backed proof, and from paralyzing fear to quiet fortitude. 1. Centered breathing and foundational posture. 2 minutes. Start by standing tall or sitting upright, ensuring your spine is straight and your shoulders relaxed but firm. Feel your feet firmly planted on the ground, connecting you to stability. Slow the breath to a deliberate count of 4 seconds in. Inhale, holding for 2 seconds, and 4 seconds out. Exhale. The goal is a dramatically lowered, steady heart rate, which translates immediately into a steady, non-wavering voice. Strong, centered posture dictates perceived strength. Practice delivering your core demands in a low, steady voice while maintaining direct, steady eye contact with a point in front of you. 2. Policy identification and citation scripting. 3 minutes. Locate and confirm the most critical, definitive document. Is it the exact lease agreement number and date? The company's internal non-discrimination clause, e.g., HR Manual, Policy 12.A, the specific section of the trust deed, or the medical record number. Write down the exact code, section, and adoption date on a small index card or note in your phone. Have your neutral, non-aggressive rebuttal phrase ready and rehearsed. I require the highest-ranking policy enforcement official currently available and a copy of the specific policy cited immediately. 3. Ally and communication confirmation. 2 minutes. Confirm your designated neutral ally. Who is your contact person designated to receive information or act as a passive witness? Send them a quick coded text, entering policy call at 10 a.m. Stand by for potential documentation upload. If they can be physically present, ensure they know their single, critical role, witness, not interjector. Their job is solely to hit record if necessary, silently and discreetly, ensuring the camera captures the physical interaction and the audible exchange, focusing on the aggressor. 4. Technology check and deployment readiness. 1 minute. Ensure your phone's camera application has a one-touch shortcut for video recording. Practice opening it instantly. Crucially, a visible phone placed silently on the table, not necessarily recording yet, serves as a powerful, non-verbal deterrent. Mentally or physically, note the exact time and location of the interaction. 5. Affirmation and authority anchor. 2 minutes. Rehearse your competence and your defined purpose. Stand in front of a mirror and recite your core affirmations. Remind yourself, internally, my dignity is non-negotiable. I am here for necessary justice and systemic correction, not for fleeting vengeance. Less panic, more proof, more decisive power. Hold the object that anchors your authority, the key card, the specific printed deed, the foundational contract, the policy card. The physical anchor connects you to the documented facts. This methodical 10-minute ritual centers your response, replaces counterproductive adrenaline with actionable information, and prepares you to deliver that calm, quiet, specific sentence that changes the outcome from emotional defeat to procedural victory. Respect your limits and secure long-term safety. We must always remember that laws and behavioral enforcement codes vary significantly by local governance, state, and country. Always ensure your strategy and citations are adapted precisely to your local jurisdiction and specific institutional handbook. Crucially, prioritize physical safety above all else. Documentation and policy citation are intended as tools of dignity, legal leverage, and long-term self-respect, not weapons for immediate physical confrontation. If an interaction becomes physically threatening, if the aggressor escalates to violence or overt intimidation, disengage immediately and cleanly. Your physical safety and well-being are paramount and non-negotiable. Document the threat, secure the evidence, and escalate via the formal, secure channels: police, designated legal counsel, or specific regulatory bodies. Dignity, is not about winning every minor skirmish or proving a point to an individual bully. It is about securing long-term systemic justice and maintaining your inviolable self-respect and documented rights. Your immediate call to action, the path to documented power. The day the deed speaks, the day the foundational badge speaks, the day the policy speaks with precision. Those are the days you definitively reclaim your personal and institutional narrative from those who seek to define you by their assumptions. You already possess the authority. You simply need to access the critical information that makes that authority visible, undeniable, and procedurally lethal. Start today. Choose at least 2 actions from this comprehensive list and complete them within the next 24 hours. 1. Save policy numbers. Locate the specific non-discrimination policy, financial disclosure requirement, or tenancy clause that most directly protects you. Save the exact citation, e.g., Code 4.2 or FHA Section 8.B, on a prominent, easy-to-access note in your phone, labeled My Core Policy Protection. 2. Set a shortcut. Create a practical, one-touch shortcut to instantly access your phone camera in video recording mode, bypassing the lock screen, if possible, specifically for immediate evidence collection. Practice accessing it instantly, 5 times. 3. Practice the phrase. Practice saying out loud to the mirror until your tone is completely neutral and firm. I require the specific policy and the highest-ranking policy enforcement official in charge immediately. Practice the words, not the emotion. 4. Choose your ally. Confirm one person you trust completely to be your neutral, documented witness. Discuss their role, silent observation, and immediate, discreet recording, upon command or sign. Commit to the full 10-minute ritual before your next meeting with a high-stakes administrator or professional. Prove to yourself, demonstrably, that prepared competence, not emotional shouting, is the strongest path to irreversible, lasting justice. In the comments below, share which specific scenario you want us to dissect and provide policy-based scripts for next. The manipulative in-laws who disrespect core house rules and asset boundaries, or the condescending doctor who continually dismisses legitimate symptoms as just aging.